Thank you for auditing the unedited new music review show hosted by a French professor who's going to be talking about PJ Harvey and her new album, I Inside the Old Year Dying. And as I like to do, this show is about new music, and I've mainly used this as a way to discover new musicians. But also, it's really been useful for me to reconnect with some musicians who have dropped off my radar. So I have a long history with PJ Harvey. I'm in my mid-40s when she was at her zenith of popularity, I suppose, was right around the time I was in my young adulthood, right? So I remember very much listening to Rid of Me for the first time, and To Bring You My Love, I thought was one of the best albums of the 90s. 4-track demos is great, but I don't have it here. I don't know where my copy of 4-track demos went, so that's a little bit annoying. Maybe I'll buy that remaster reissue thing. But what's interesting is really who she was to me was sort of unfair, because I talk about this a fair amount. I was a teenage misogynist. I didn't know I was a misogynist. I didn't think that I disliked women or anything that women liked, but that was how I behaved and that's how I thought. And so there's very few female musicians that sort of passed the bar that I listened to, I mean, sure, I would drive to school, and if a Heart song came on, I would scream Barracuda at the top of my lungs in falsetto, but I wouldn't buy their CD, that kind of thing. And there are a few exceptions. There were two exceptions, Bjork and PJ Harvey. And I think for PJ Harvey, it was just this perception that I had that she was just a she Nick Cave, just a female version of Nick Cave. And what's funny is, now that I have reviewed recent Nick Cave and recent PJ Harvey, hey, new PJ Harvey is way better than new Nick Cave, at least in my opinion. And that's, it's nice to have that sort of weird perception inversed. I saw her in concert in Boston at a place called the Avalon with Tricky opening up for her. This must have been back in like 94 or 95. So, that's how long it's been. But why did she drop off my radar? In general, I remember I bought Dig Lazarus Dig, even though that was during my period of time where I was asleep to new music between 2002 and 2018 when I started this channel. I still kept up with Nick Cave. Why didn't I keep up with PJ Harvey? I lost her in the divorce. So what that means is, even though I was a fan of PJ Harvey before I met my future ex-wife, throughout the marriage, somehow she became a bigger fan, and especially that album, The Stories of the City and Stories of the Country and Stories of My Uncle's Bungalow, all that, that album, that ended up sort of being her thing. And so my children sort of associated her with my ex-wife, and so it just sort of became like a thing where she sort of wordlessly exited this house. And I tell you that level of personal detail just because it's funny. It's arbitrary, It's not like this was anything ever spoken by anybody, but this can happen. So I am really delighted to listen to this new album, which the title I'm having a hard time with, I Inside the Old Year Dying, which is just as good as any of these albums. I'd put this right up there. I mean, seriously, 30 years. 30 years since this album. And she releases something this good with many of the same collaborators, I talk about it all the time, but the greats of the 60s were not great in the 90s. They did not have 30-year careers. I mean, sure, they were still making music, but were the Rolling Stones or any of the members of the Beatles making anything that even sniffed at an approximation of a fraction of the genius of what they did in the 60s? Only Neil Young stayed vibrant. Maybe Frank Zappa as well. Only those two managed to actually continue making art in a similar spirit and way and quality as they had in the 60s. And we're just lucky. Lucky, I don't know, maybe it's a question of drugs or history or who knows what. But here we have PJ Harvey 30 years after Rid of Me, and she's making an album that's just as good. It is, however, not as easy to understand as these two albums. So, these two albums really responded well to me. What's funny is these albums came out in a time sort of around my sort of sexual awakening. And so it's interesting because I didn't like I didn't get a lot of what she was singing. I get it now. I get jokes, but I knew there was something sexual, something sensual going on here. I knew that it hit me on that level, but it wasn't like she was some kind of pinup doll that I had up on my wall. You know, it wasn't like that. It was more that there was a sort of awakening in me. And that's fun because this album is partly about that kind of adolescent awakening. But this album is very hard to understand. And let me tell you some of the things I'm not going to do. I'm not going to read her book, Orlam, I don't know how to pronounce it. Not for any reason other than just I'm going on like a 3-week vacation, and I have to get things ready. Normally I would buy the book and read it first, so I apologize to all you my auditors. Normally that's the kind of thing I would do. I don't have the time to do that now. I'm not going to try to decipher the mysticism, the borderline pagan mysticism that's going on through most of this album. I'm not going to learn how to speak Dorset, the dialect of the southern part of England where she's from and where a lot of this album takes place. I guess Bournemouth is a city in there, and they have a team in the Premier League. So there you go. But what I will tell you is the basic ideas. The same way that understanding these are largely about unhealthy, sexually gratifying relationships for young women, I can basically trace out the ideas of this album just from listening. A little bit of looking at Lyric Genius, a little bit of research, but really just from listening. And it is about the passage of adolescence to adulthood, or from childhood to adolescence. I guess from girlhood to young womanhood. And this is all represented by, I believe, the months of July and August, especially August, which represents moving on to the fall. You know, my son's going off to college, and I'm already dreading August as being some kind of American Graffiti nightmare of thinking about him going off and becoming an adult and all that stuff. But this really feels like it's about a sort of awakening. It's an awakening in nature, surrounded by birds and trees and bushes. There's a sort of mystical, witchcrafty feel. This is going to sound very uneducated of me, but I can't help but think about the movie Wicker Man. Not the one with Nicolas Cage. Not the bees. Not that one. The original from the 70s. If you've never seen Wicker Man, it's a truly spooky movie. Not because it's scary, but because it really has a real witchcrafty feel. And just remember, you know, that England, Great Britain, you know, like they were, you know, it took them a while to get into Christianity. It really was a pre-Christian society. All the druids and mystical runes and menhirs and Stonehenges and all that stuff, you know. So it really was a very pagan place. A quick linguistic note. Pagan is an interesting word. It comes from like paganos, which just means farmer. It means like literally a farmer. Like pagan, paisan, all goes back to that basic idea of being a farmer. It took on an anti-Christian theme when people realized that if you lived in the woods, if you lived and you were a farmer on the fields, then you were far away from Rome. Therefore, you didn't know about Jesus. Like you were just. Well, what does a farmer in Dorset country know about some guy a couple hundred years ago who got nailed to a cross? Nothing. Well, how are they supposed to know? So the term wasn't initially pejorative. It just meant country person, which is my last name. My last name is Payne. Comes from Pagan. Means pagan. That's literally my last name is Pagan, you know? So the sort of paganish stuff here, but it's not like crystals and ooh, ah. It doesn't feel like that at all. It doesn't feel like it's trying to be new agey. If something can be pagan and witchcrafty without being new agey, first of all, that's impressive because I hate new age stuff. I just, ugh. If I see a crystal store, like literally, I get the heebie-jeebies, okay? I get the jubbly wobblies. I get it all. But this doesn't do that because it really does feel spiritual. So here we have this basic idea of like a story that seems to be about a young woman or an old girl, and she's in this part of England, and this language is often spoken that's not quite English. And then there's this sort of central male figure, which she refers to as Wyman Elvis. Elvis being Elvis Presley, obviously, who is this... and this is what I like so much about this, is that it's not sacrilegious. It's not making fun of Jesus or God. It's the misunderstanding. It's like not a sexual album, if that makes sense. Like, it's not an album that's like, you know, it's not a sexual album like some of her other albums are, but it seems to be about a sexual awakening of a young woman starting to understand sexual urges or impulses, and they're sort of around the figure of Elvis, who I think matters as an individual, but is also a symbol, sort of symbol of lust, a symbol of longing, a symbol of someone outside of her. There, like seriously, she actually asks in the middle of this album, "Are you Elvis? Are you God?" Like, that's how mixed up they are. And she's not trying to say that Elvis is God, but she's trying to represent this confusion, and it does it really well. It does it really well, the confusion of adolescence. And I know it sounds creepy to have a middle-aged man describing the sexual confusions of teenagers, but this is a human experience. Okay, that's what PJ Harvey's describing, a human experience which we all went through. We all went through this moment where we didn't quite understand things, and our understandings of spirituality and sexuality and morality all get kind of mixed up. We all had those feelings. We're just not all PJ Harvey capable of making an album like this that gets it perfectly. Wyman is apparently a Dorset word, which means warrior, and there's this warrior figure who appears to be like Elvis appears to be the warrior and the not warrior. Maybe this is like symbolic of a soldier who she loves, because Wyman means warrior or soldier. Maybe it's a general symbol of masculinity or a kind of idealized masculinity. I'm going to go on a tangent, which I don't think is true. Caveat. What I'm going to be doing now is some of the lowest level of analysis. Word association. Okay? This is the lowest level. But I'm going to present an alternate reading to this, which is that there is actually a man in this story, an actual man who had sexual relations with a teenage girl in this story. I say that because I don't know. Maybe PJ Harvey is referring to Wyman, and it's not a reference to Bill Wyman, the bass player for the Rolling Stones. Oh, did you just roll your eyes? I don't blame you. This idea is total horse hockey. Don't listen to me at all, but I just have to get it out, or else it's going to fester in my brain, okay? Bill Wyman was the bass player for the Rolling Stones, who famously married somebody who he had been dating since she was like 12, when he was already in his 30s. Like, really, really bad. Like, really bad. Like, I remember in the 90s there was a joke. Did you hear Bill Wyman was late to a concert? He had to come back from watching his next wife being born. Like, that was the joke. Ha ha, edgelord teenage Skye. I did think that was funny when I was in high school. Bad. And if you don't know what they say about Elvis, not so much that he actually had sexual intercourse with teenagers, but that he would have them wrestle each other in their underwear backstage. So I don't know if this Wyman Elvis name is supposed to evoke two famous people who had sexual relationships with minors in different ways. But maybe. I'm going to strike that. I'm now never going to mention that again. That is not my official theory. That is just word association. But it's hard because, you know, if in 20 years someone released an album and it was like, oh yeah, that's the god R. Kelly, you'd be like, whoa. Did you mean to say R. Kelly? Is that what you mean? Okay. Not to say that Bill Wyman was as bad as R. Kelly. A couple more notes. I guarantee you this is Tom York's album of the year. Tom York loves this album. I haven't heard him talk about it, but this not only reminds me of a lot of things that Tom York tries to do, but it reminds me of things that I've heard him like before, like the Robert Wyatt album from like 15 years ago. It's just, yeah, anyways, I just bet that. What I love about this album in particular, and this goes back to all of her work, is she's just totally comfortable recording R-A-W, super raw. You know, at times you're like, come on, is that the best take? And yes, that is the best take. The best take is always the take that they chose. It's always the best for feel. It feels sometimes like the microphone's too far away or too close, or the drums are tuned weird. Sometimes it feels like the vocals are not the perfect take. And I really do believe that is entirely intentional and gives it this raw feel, which actually is necessary for the album itself, because the album has this bizarre, shrubbery, thorny, lost in the woods kind of feeling. In some ways, it also reminds me a little bit of Fetch the Bolt Cutters. I don't know. Maybe it's just I have a bias because they're both by female vocalists that mattered to me in the 90s. And also just a quick, just in case, this is just, anyways. If you like this kind of thing, if you've never heard Please Daddy by Sarah Mary Chadwick, if you like female vocalists singing painfully about sort of sex and longing, this is just a super good album. It doesn't sound that much like PJ Harvey, but if you like female vocalists singing with a pretty strong accent in a way that really moves you, that's just my little recommendation there. I just have to do it because not enough people listen to Chadwick. All right, so, I'm going to get to my example song. This is my mug, my only piece of merch. It's based on the Kafka poster behind me. Kind of neat, right? Got my name on there. Drink your coffee. Smash the like bucket. That's what I say. Please subscribe. And if you leave a comment and the letters AVAA are in there, awesome video as always, I will guarantee to give you a heart. Even if I'm on vacation. Okay? I'll check them at least once a day. Go through, give some hearts, give out some hats. All right, so it was hard to pick a stamp to this album because it very clearly feels novelistic. It feels like she's telling a poetic story and taking us on a poetic journey. But I'll do my best, okay? The example song I'm going to pick is called A Child's Question, August. Click above the bananas, above the guides, okay? This is a great example of the production and the sound of this album, the pulsing sound, the percussion's almost like a little rattle. The music almost sounds like a drone or like an alarm with this beautiful singing that goes high to low. And then the insane poeticness of this album comes clear when you read like this quote from her where she says the starting point came from a Coleridge poem. The guy who wrote the Albatross. Do you ask what the birds say, the sparrow, the dove, the linnet, and thrush say, I love, I love, I love. So this is a poem called Answer to a Child's Question. So PJ Harvey is very clearly thinking a lot about her place in the history of British poetry. Okay, he was not from Dorset. He was from Devon. Devonshire upon Sussex? I don't know. I think it's called Devonshire. But still. So this is the idea of the song. And this is her continuing to talk about the song. Answer to a child's question. In my song, we look to the universe for answers amidst the bittersweet melancholy of fading summer. We inhabit a shadow land poisoned on several thresholds, child and adult, day and night, the tipping point between seasons and between life and death. Ben Winshaw sings with me on the choruses, and my work partners for the last 30 years, John Parrish and Flood, have produced the sound world we inhabit, mysterious and magical. The answer that comes, ultimately one of positivity and love presiding never more powerfully than by the great Elvis Presley. So that's the whole album in like one little paragraph, right? Mentioning Parrish and Flood, who she's worked with for 30 years, okay? She's been working with them for a while. You know, PJ Harvey is PJ Harvey, and if you listen to the demos and stuff, you listen to her, like, she is her, but like she doesn't have a band. If she had a band, it would be these two people who just help her produce her vision. Mysterious and magical, that is the sound of the whole album. The whole damn album sounds mysterious and magical. I don't know, like... I don't know. I was watching Anthony Bourdain in Hungary yesterday, and we're going to be going to Budapest. And he was saying how, like, people were getting mad at him because he stops giving descriptions of food. But he's like, what more do you want from me? Just to give the same, like, 5 or 6 different adjectives just to tell you that food's good? It's good. You know, like, it's mysterious and magical. I mean, really, though, in this song, I'll be more specific, it is the droning quality of the music that creates a kind of almost like transcendental trance-like state, and then the singing is just this beautiful descending melody. Starling swarms will soon be lorn, rooks tell stories across the corn. Okay, this isn't just like, even though she's making all these references to 19th century British poets and sort of the past and sort of high poetry, most of the poetry here really feels like pastoral. It really feels like it's about being in the fields. I'm also re-listening to a biography of Mozart. Did you know Mozart had a starling? When his dad died, he didn't care. He didn't care. Even though his dad was so important in his life, he didn't like write anything about his dad. He just sort of said he passed. And a couple days later or a week later, his starling died, and he wrote this beautiful poem. So there you go. It's a beautiful, another thing I like about this song, it's a total continuation of the previous song, and it sets up the next song. This whole album feels like it's just sort of one atmosphere with all these different little plays in that atmosphere. And just this chorus is just, it's just the best. It's the best. It's my favorite moment in any PJ Harvey song ever. Okay? The surpassing, lick my leg, down, bump, lick my leg, down, down, down. I had no idea what she was singing. I was in high school. I remember when I read the lyrics. Oh, lick my legs. What says Dunnock, Drush, or Dove, love me tender, tender love? So Dunnock, Drush, and Dove are all local birds to Dorset. I'm sure I could find them in there. But the way this is sung, what say Dunnock, Drush, or Dove, love me tender, tender love. This is like this doubled voice, and it's so like ethereal and deep and moving and weird. It's like the birds are singing love me tender back to her, and love me tender over and over and over and over and over again. That's the real center point of this album. It's a intertextual conversation with the song Love Me Tender as performed by Elvis, right? And it makes sense because if you can listen to the song Love Me Tender and not be a little bit erotically moved, I don't think you have an erotic bone in your body. And I'm not even bisexual. But if I but Love Me Tender, I mean, come on, you know? How does that not move you, you know? You know? And what's great about that song in particular is it's an innocent song. You know, it's not like, love me tender, lick my legs of desire, It's a very sweet song that anyone can listen to. But it gets you going. It gets the people going, So it's great. It's this great conversation. And I don't know about you, but I literally picture myself in Dorset, what I imagine Dorset looks like. I imagine it looking like the that where those little trolls are in Frozen, or I imagine it like the weird woods in Dracula. I don't know. I have a whole bunch of weird movie ideas in my head, which is a problem of being a 21st century schizoid man. But like I picture a sort of wooded glen. And I picture like someone talking and having this sort of fantastical commune with nature, and these birds arriving and actually singing Love Me Tender. It's beautiful. Okay, I'm going to go with the rest of the album a little bit quicker. Oh my God. Whoa. Hey, if you ever meet me in person, ask me the Love Me Tender story, okay? Because I have a story I don't feel comfortable sharing because it's a very private detail that I just remembered right now. But I'll tell you in person. You ever see me in person? Say, hey, Skye, what's the Love Me Tender story? God damn. I can't believe I just remembered that. I probably haven't thought of that story for 30 years. Wow. Anyways, Prayer at the Gate is the opening track. Has this kind of like bell and almost like a prayer bell sound, really an incantation, almost a theremin sound. And then the way these drums are tuned, they're super tight. This is that feeling that I had a little bit of the Fetch the Bolt Cutters. Because the reason I love Fetch the Bolt Cutters is it's a drum album that also has melody to it. This album is not a drum album, but at times the drums are just very central. Lots of do-do-do-do-do's here, these chords changing underneath. And this is, the first time I listened, I didn't know that a lot of it was sung with Dorset words mixed in there. So I just had no idea what the hell was going on. When I listened to this album, it was like, I'm in my worries, baby, where to me? Like, that's what I heard, I thought that lick my leg, go, go, go was hard to understand. This doesn't. So I did have to take some time, because, she's singing in this high, rough, and nasally voice that is also sensuous. So, hey, have you tried singing high, rough, nasal, and sensuous? Allow me to try. Oh, baby, I want to love you all day long. It's really hard to do. You can't. Did I say all day long? It's a diurnal love song. So it turns out, after reading the lyrics, Wyman, am I worthy? Speak your wordle to me. This is not a reference to the New York Times word game, Wordle, which I played for 3 weeks until I lost, and then I have not played it since. Hey, you live by the streak, you die by the streak. Speak your wordle to me, I mean speak your word to me. So this is that sort of incantation where it seems as though she's like going into the woods and calling a metaphorical figure, male figure, to come and romance her. This soldier, singer, poet, bird, man, all these things all at once. And there is a reading, which I've already provided to you, which I do not think of there being an actual person there, an actual predator. But what I love is just the blown out and just rough sounds. It's just so blown out. It's like, it's so blown out. It's great. And then at times her voice is like super timid, but here she has this like almost Grace Slick level of strength and confidence and just all this great atmosphere. Then we get to Autumn Term. That got that great overtuned drum set, this really high falsetto over this guitar curl. Her voice is all over the place on this album. Sometimes it's falsetto, sometimes it's low. Sometimes it's like old school, but very often is it very old school. Eventually some really heavier sounds come in, sort of intentionally poorly mixed, I think. How could I possibly understand these lyrics? The slowy spears on witches' mead, cust, come lean on these. So I couldn't have possibly understood. What's interesting is before those lyrics are, I ascend 3 steps to hell, the school bus heaves up the hill. So the school bus is you tell me in the comments if you're a big PJ Harvey fan and you've listened to this album more than I have. Is this the only sort of like modern reference? There's Elvis, but still there's like the image of a yellow school bus has this very interrupting quality where just you're picturing all this, green, right? Just green, gray. Right? We're in England, so everything's gray because it's England. And then everything's green because it's England, right? So green and gray, and then this yellow number 5 bus just comes in, and 3 steps to hell. School buses are hell. They are. For a lot of people, they're hell. I'll never forget my son's first day going on a school bus. The very, very, very first day. I told him, I take him aside, I say, hey, keep a low profile, okay? What does that mean, Poppy? Just like, try not to make yourself seen, just sort of try to sort of be invisible. And then some older kid gets on the bus and like drops his backpack, and my son laughs. And for the rest of the year, he was tortured by the older boys and called the laughing boy. School buses are hell. So it's interesting to have this incantation, this entrance into the slowy spears on witches' mead, but at the same time, we're in an actual school bus. That's how this album's able to go between these themes so well. And there's like these kids' sounds in the back. It's very unsettling. It reminds me of Recess. If you ever want to hear the loudest sound on planet Earth, go outside of a recess. Like, especially in Europe, there'll be like schools and cities that are behind walls and you can't see them, like in Paris or Marseille or anywhere in France, is where I'm thinking, but I'm sure anywhere in Europe, any city in Europe. And it's just like the cacophony that comes from behind those sounds. And it's almost like metallic guitar and this outro. And then we get the Lonesome Tonight, another great Elvis erotic song. Almost a Western guitar here, very thumping low drums with some feedback in the back. The production on this is so delicate and wonderful. What I like about this too is I keep dreaming of the earth, and she talks about ferns uncurling. And ferns, I sort of hate ferns. I don't know if you have an opinion on ferns. I sort of hate them and sort of love them. Like I can smell ferns right now if I just close my eyes and think, right? They're such a strong smell. It's such a great symbol of overgrowth or of abandoned woods or just like actual nature. You know, actual nature is ferns for much of the world. You know, the kind of dark dampness of these ferns. And there's this frailty and this weakness to her voice. And then we have the theme of sexual awakening. Girl yearns to yet ungirl. You know, how do you ungirl? You know, you become woman, right? Almost Radiohead style structure here. It's kind of restrained growth. Maybe even sort of, you know, I'm obsessed with the impact that The Rip by Portishead had on Radiohead. I think that song like basically made them do what they did after that. You know, really. This feels like it's in that realm. This is that whole "Are you Elvis? Are you God?" question, which I've already discussed. Seen M.I. is my least favorite song on the album, but I do like it. It starts off with just a voice, which is cool, and then becomes a very Neil Young style guitar. Like, this is like if Neil Young played guitar for the Doors. That's what this song is like. Sort of more of this mystical poetry. The Nether Edge almost has a horror movie beginning, very bass-led, these echoey synthesizers as well. Here, her voice is just very clear. At times, her voice is very clear. And it's all about these chalky children. Chalky children. I guess it just means like very white children, right? Because when you're a pagan, you know, when you're pretty far away from Rome and you're up there like my folks were, you know, my great ancestors in the north there, you know, you get pretty chalky. So I think it's a interesting, sterile, stark image. And chalky children become an important part of this album. The chocolate chicken. What is the Tribe Called Quest line? Chickadee Chuck, the chocolate chicken. Anyway, you tell me in the comments if you know what I'm talking about. If not, hey, I don't edit my videos. You're going to have to watch me take another sip of coffee. There's a lot of really cool production tricks on this song. Like the voice is like echoed and like there's like a mechanical stutter echo. There's a weird almost like children's song at the end. She changes the melody. March will search, April will try, May will tell you if you live or die. This is apparently an old Dorset saying about health and weather. Again, this is a very localized. I imagine if you are from Dorset, this album is like, oh, this is everything that like I bet this really represents well the sort of pre-modern Dorset mythology as it infects modern life. Because it doesn't matter where you live, even if you grew up in a place with virtually no history, like I did, Massachusetts, and whatever the myths are of that place, really infects your thinking about the way things are. You know, so I would think about the Revolutionary War and all that, you know, because I lived right by Lexington, right? So you sort of have all these ideas in your head, and so this feels like it's sort of a love letter to Dorset mythology and the feeling of that place. And even though I'm not from Dorset, never been to Dorset, I've never been to Bournemouth, I relate to it because I understand the sort of longing to connection of pre-modernity that it represents. Oh, I just said modernity. Grad school. Okay, next, I Inside the Old Year Dying, the title track, rough acoustic guitar. Where are they putting the microphone here? Hey, John Parrish, where'd you put the microphone? The voice is super ragged and over the top. It's We're sort of in her 90s voice here. Very interesting melody. Very short song with very few lyrics. Drush repeats himself over underwhelm. Croupied in the reams. Shepherd girl weaves. I like all this language play. Has a great pulsing ending. We get to All Souls. Very far away underwater synthesizers that are almost blurred out. And this feels like an incantation. This feels very Wicker Man. All Souls Day. That's November 1st. It's a day of synchronization where the Catholics realized that a lot of these pagans who they took over would have these kind of festivals in the fall that would be dedicated to the dead. So they kind of just wrapped that into some kind of festival, but fundamentally, and we see it with Halloween, okay, we see it with Toussaint, and in the French-speaking world, it's a pagan holiday. Like, you can't do anything about it. I'm sorry, Christians. You did your best. You lost. Humanity, no matter how Christian-y Christian, Idonum, Perlus Unum, whatever the hell it is, we want some kind of pagan deal in the fall. Now, I'm not talking like my old neighbors who used to have like straight up like prayer circles with stones and stuff, and they invited me to their solstice party. I'm like, it's cool. You're cool. I like you. Good people. But I'm not. I'm good. But this has that kind of feeling. There's like this weird like numerology of counting up to 8, and his voice is doubled. And it seems to be almost about this affair with Wyman Elvis, this figure of longing and love. Then we get to the stamp, A Child's Question August. I already discussed this. I inside, the old I dying. This is, now that I think about it, this title makes sense, right? Like, that's what adolescence is. It's the I inside, it's the old I dying inside the I. I. King's Speech, right? Anyways, very kind of comfort. Okay, here's a point. Here's a point about the PJ Harvey album. It's comforting and ominous at the same time. So there you go. You're welcome. Those are contradictory emotions, but it's true. This album is very comforting and very ominous. Repetition of the chalky children of Evermore. Very weird chorus with these bells and Wyman, oh Wyman, unray, I unray, 4N. August has this cool like hi-hat thing where the hi-hat's being opened and closed on the 1, 2, 3, 4. It has kind of a rambling feeling. It almost feels like it's not even a song. This song feels like it's just the atmosphere of the album just like squeezed into one little song nugget with some more Love Me Tender stuff. Child's Question July has weird cryptic Wicker Man stuff. All hail the hedge as it grows. Ask the hedge all it knows. The night time is the right time. It's sort of a I don't think, is it supposed to be goofy? There's a playful nature to the way she's singing here. It feels like, but it, again, pre-Christian spirituality is really interesting. So that's where we are here. Has sort of her most British accent. I always sort of thought that she was from Australia because I just sort of thought she was Nick Cave when I was younger. That's why I don't think I realized she was British until like way after I should have. This song, when you read the lyrics and do the translations, is actually about sex and drugs. So this appears to be about the sort of, you have your early adolescence and you have the awakening, and then when you start to give into the awakening, you have the shame and the guilt that come along with it in the sense that you should be doing something else. Tell me who has licked the toad, what is hidden beneath the road. Licking a toad, symbolic of a hallucinogen. What's beneath the ooser rod, horny devil, goaty god. Okay, I'm going to show you something. This is kind of cool. I did a little bit of research, okay? So this little fella is called the ooser, okay? From a very specific part of Dorset. And it was like this devilly head that was used in different religious functions to sort of like I don't know, scare people into being right, but also, as is often the case, anything that's like, hey, look at this big evil thing that reminds us of our pre-Christian heritage. It's bad. Don't think it's kind of cool. This super rad thing, don't think it's cool. These gargoyles, you'll see these rad things when you go to hell, but don't think they're cool, right? So that's the oozer. So what's inside the oozer rod is saying what's inside the devil's dick. That's your question. And if you don't know, in Christian mythology, the devil's dick is gigantic. That's like part of the whole thing. You know, there was this real intent. It was like very important in the patriarchal societies that popped up around Christianity, that large penises were very, very bad. Just a sign of a lack of intellect and control and a tendency towards savagery and cruelty. We don't like big dongs. The big dongs are actually really, really bad. Okay, that's just, you know, that like take for example David, the statue of David, which has a proportional penis, by the way. It's not a small penis. It's proportional, but it looks small, just the way Michelangelo made it. The point was not that it was small, as it was well proportioned. Because if the perfect image of masculinity was hanging dong, it would have been a sign of a lack of control and measure. Okay, I'm not making this stuff up. Okay, I'm just telling you what I know through living 45 years and paying attention when people talk about dongs. Okay, so now you know. And, you know, this is part of that sexual excitement, you know, like the fear and the excitement and the drugs and the sex. And then it ends with the track, A Noiseless Noise. Starts off with Absence, some nice Marshall snare work, beautiful voice, like some real rock guitar. This is maybe the most 90s that this album gets. But it's awesome because she's not trying to sound 90s. Like, her sound just evolved just naturally, and this is just how she sounds now. Hey, what's up with Keats? What? Why? 2 albums in the last 2 weeks have to do with Keats. The Swans album quotes Keats, my name was written on the water. And then this, A Noiseless Noise, comes from a Keats poem. And then there crept a little noiseless noise among the leaves, born on the very sigh that silence heaves. That's from the poem, I Stood Tiptoe Upon a Little Hill. Props to Lyric Genius for whoever it is that wrote that. It's not a joke site. It's a good site. So, anyways, another reference to poetry. Keats wasn't from Dorset either. He was from London, but he died in Rome. That's where. Watch my Swans video. If you want to see another video about an artist who I liked but didn't really understand and made me feel a lot of very confused, dark sexual feelings in the 90s and who's still making great music now, see my Swans video that I just released a couple months ago. Just a golly girl, just a bogus boy, trape the fields of Feason to a chamber of not sleeping, go home now love, leave your wandering. So this like golly girl means a hollow girl and a bogus boy. So sort of the whole romantic trip that this whole album has been, the sexual, pre-Christian, mystical journey into young adulthood is now just being, go home. Leave your wandering. We're out of the woods. We're going back to the house, and then we're just going to live our normal life in Dorset. Awesome, right? Damn, what an album. And also, props to Partisan Records. They are killing it. They signed her, and they got, what, Idols, and they got Geese. They got some great music coming out right now. Partisan Records is looking to be, like, one of the better independent labels out there right now. And they don't sponsor me. I just said that. So they don't sponsor me. I don't do sponsorships. I do Patreon. These people give me money, and then I buy music with that. And now my wife is texting me, which is perfect because I got to go soon. Okay? So there you go. Until next time, there's the camera.